If you've ever hiked Long's Peak Trail near Chasm Lake, you might have heard whispers about Station 7. What the Park Service won't tell you is that on November 15, 1975, Alpine Station 7 was completely destroyed in a catastrophic avalanche that buried 5 rangers under 30 feet of snow and rock. What they really won't tell you is that the station has been operational ever since. My name is David Martinez, and my grandfather, Bobby Martinez, was one of those 5 rangers who died that day. He was only 22, fresh out of ranger training, eager to protect the wilderness he loved. For 44 years, my family believed he was gone forever. We were wrong. The first report came in September 2019. 2 Denver hikers, Ashley and Derek, contacted Park Dispatch claiming they'd encountered a functioning ranger station near Chasm Lake. The problem was simple: there was no station at Chasm Lake. When veteran ranger Thomas Brennan investigated their claims, what he discovered challenged everything we understood about life, death, and the mountain itself. The hikers described meeting an older ranger with a gray beard and a distinctive scar across his left eyebrow. He'd served them hot coffee from a vintage percolator, shown them maps that depicted trails that didn't exist, and mountains in impossible locations. Most disturbing of all, his calendar displayed November 12, 1975, 3 days before the avalanche that supposedly killed him. When Ranger Brennan reached the coordinates the hikers provided, he found something that defied explanation. Alpine Station 7 stood exactly where it had been constructed in 1968. Warm light glowed from its windows, smoke curled from its chimney, and through the frosted glass, he could see figures in vintage ranger uniforms moving inside. The building looked exactly as it had in the 1970s photographs, down to the green metal roofing and faded gold lettering displaying the number 7. Inside, Brennan encountered all 5 rangers who had supposedly perished in 1975. Bill Hutchison, the station supervisor, looked exactly as he had at 53. Sarah Coleman, the park's best climber, still wore her regulation uniform with perfect creases. Mike Ortiz, Jennifer Park, and my grandfather Bobby Martinez appeared frozen at the moment of their deaths, unchanged by the decades that had passed. But these weren't ghosts in any traditional sense. They were fully corporeal, able to interact with physical objects, serve real coffee, write detailed reports. They existed in a temporal paradox, trapped between the moment before the avalanche and the moment after, experiencing all time simultaneously, while remaining anchored to that final day in 1975. The Rangers explained their impossible situation with the calm professionalism that had defined their careers. The avalanche hadn't been natural. Deep beneath Long's Peak, something had been stirring since the 1920s when Cavendish Mining Company had accidentally breached a chamber that shouldn't exist at that altitude. The avalanche was the mountain's attempt to seal the breach, and the 5 rangers had become the guardians, preventing something far worse from emerging. Every September, when atmospheric conditions align with their quantum state, the station manifests most solidly in our reality. During these windows, they can interact with living hikers, provide shelter from storms, and continue their eternal duty of protecting the park. But their manifestation comes at a cost. Each appearance weakens the temporal barrier they maintain, bringing them closer to a final choice between their existence and the safety of millions. The photographs taken by the hikers revealed more than visible light could capture. Through digital enhancement, the images showed the station existing in multiple time states simultaneously. In some frames, it appeared as it did in 1975. In others, it showed the avalanche in progress, with walls of snow and debris frozen mid-impact. Most disturbing were the frames that showed the station as it would appear in possible futures, weathered by decades of existence in temporal limbo. My grandfather Bobby recognized me immediately when I finally encountered the station myself. Despite being dead for 44 years, despite existing outside normal time, he knew about my graduation from Ranger Academy, my assignment to Rocky Mountain National Park, and my dedication to continuing his work. He looked exactly as he did in his Academy graduation photo, young and determined, but his eyes held the wisdom and weariness of someone who had been standing guard for nearly half a century. The Phantom Rangers of Alpine Station 7 continue their duty to this day. They appear to lost hikers during severe weather, providing shelter and guidance that has saved dozens of lives. They maintain detailed logs of their activities, entries that appear in official park records with timestamps from decades past, present, and future. Their existence challenges our understanding of death itself, proving that dedication to duty can transcend the boundaries of mortality. Park officials have classified their existence at the highest levels, but experienced rangers know the truth. When weather conditions deteriorate above 11,000 feet, they always work in pairs, knowing that if they become lost or injured, they might encounter a station that exists between moments, staffed by colleagues who refuse to let death end their service to the park and its visitors. Story 2. The Crystalline Collectors Beneath Long's Peak. In 1924, Cavendish Mining Company made a discovery that should have remained buried forever. While excavating at 12,500 feet on Long's Peak's north face, miners broke through into a perfectly spherical chamber, approximately 200 feet in diameter. The walls were composed of an unknown crystalline material that maintained a constant temperature of -8 degrees Fahrenheit despite the lack of any cooling system. 7 miners entered the chamber that day. Only one emerged, and what he brought back was a story of horror that the mining company immediately suppressed. Thomas Cavendish Jr., age 28, was found in a catatonic state 3 days later, repeating a single phrase. "It sees all times at once. It's waiting to be born." When he finally died from causes that baffled doctors at the time, his body showed signs of extreme aging despite his youth, as if he had lived multiple lifetimes simultaneously. The mining operation ceased immediately, and the entrance was sealed with dynamite. But the chamber's influence didn't end there. Every 44 years, seismic activity centered on Long's Peak would spike dramatically, accompanied by phenomena that defied scientific explanation. Rangers reported hearing harmonious singing emanating from within the mountain, frequencies that caused temporal disorientation, and made witnesses claim they had experienced hours or days during minutes of real time. What they had found was an entity from another dimension, a consciousness composed of living mathematics that existed in more spatial dimensions than human minds could process. It had been traveling between universes when geological conditions on Earth created a trop, compressing its multidimensional form into our 3-dimensional space. The resulting imprisonment had driven it to desperation, causing it to reach out for minds that could help it escape. The entity's method of escape was terrifying in its implications. It would collect human consciousness, pulling people into the crystalline chamber, where they would exist in a state of quantum superposition, experiencing every moment of their life simultaneously. These trapped minds would serve as processing power for the mathematical equations required to breach dimensional barriers and return home, but the process left them in a state of eternal torment. Between 1976 and 2019, 17 hikers vanished near Long's Peak under circumstances that baffled search and rescue teams. They would simply disappear without a trace, their last known positions showing no signs of struggle or natural disaster. Park rangers found no bodies, no equipment, no indication of where they might have gone. What they didn't know was that these individuals had been pulled through dimensional cracks into the crystalline chamber, where they experienced infinite variations of their existence while their consciousness was harvested for the entity's escape attempts. The chamber existed in a state of temporal flux, appearing differently to each observer based on their psychological state and temporal proximity to significant events. Some witnesses described it as a natural crystal cave with beautiful formations. Others saw it as a technological nightmare of impossible geometry and alien architecture. What remained consistent were the trapped figures visible within the crystalline structures, frozen in expressions of terror and ecstasy as they experienced every possible version of their lives. The entity's communication methods were almost as dangerous as its collection methods. It would project thoughts directly into human minds, using mathematical concepts and physics equations that our brains weren't evolved to process. Rangers who listened too long to these transmissions would begin speaking in formulas, describing spatial relationships that didn't exist in our reality, and eventually lose their grip on linear time entirely. The breakthrough in understanding came when park officials realized that the entity wasn't malevolent in any traditional sense. It was simply trying to return home, much like a whale beached on shore, causing destruction not from evil intent, but from the sheer incompatibility of its existence with our environment. Its natural state required mathematical constants and physical laws that didn't exist in our universe, making its presence here a form of cosmic claustrophobia that had lasted for nearly a century. The resolution of the crystalline collector crisis required a sacrifice that challenged the boundaries between heroism and suicide. When the entity's escape attempts reached critical mass in 2019, threatening to tear open permanent dimensional breaches that would affect millions, Ranger Thomas Brennan volunteered to serve as a permanent bridge between dimensions, allowing the entity to return home while sealing the chamber forever. His transformation into a quantum guardian freed the 17 trapped hikers, but condemned him to exist in all possible timelines simultaneously. The crystalline chamber no longer exists in our reality, having collapsed into dimensional nothingness when the entity departed. But the site remains under constant monitoring, and park officials maintain strict protocols for any unusual activity detected in the area. The 17 rescued hikers aged rapidly to match the time they had lost while trapped, some gaining decades and seconds, but they returned with knowledge of existence beyond normal human comprehension. Story 3: The Temporal Paradox of Station 7's Eternal Guardian. The most disturbing aspect of the Station 7 incident wasn't the discovery of supernatural entities or dimensional breaches. It was the realization that time itself could be manipulated, and that the cost of preventing catastrophe might require someone to exist outside the normal flow of reality forever. When Ranger Thomas Brennan made the decision to become the permanent guardian of the dimensional threshold, he understood that he would be sacrificing more than his life. He would be sacrificing his existence in linear time, becoming something between human and quantum phenomenon, forever watching over a danger that could never be fully eliminated. When Ranger Thomas Brennan made the decision to become the permanent guardian of the dimensional threshold, he understood that he would be sacrificing more than his life. He would be sacrificing his existence in linear time, becoming something between human and quantum phenomenon, forever watching over a danger that could never be fully eliminated. The transformation began when Brennan used the impossible radio device that communicated across time itself. By creating a paradox within the existing temporal anomaly, he split reality into multiple timelines simultaneously. In one timeline, the 5 Rangers of Station 7 died in 1975, as history recorded. In another, they evacuated just in time and lived full lives. By existing in both possibilities at once, Brennan created enough paradox energy to contain the dimensional entity while allowing it to escape harmlessly. But the process required a permanent anchor, someone to maintain the paradox indefinitely. Brennan volunteered, knowing that he had only months to live due to lung cancer contracted from decades of high-altitude service. Rather than die uselessly in a hospital bed, he chose to transform into something that could serve the park forever, existing at all moments simultaneously while maintaining his essential humanity. The transformation was witnessed by his colleague David Martinez, grandson of one of the original Station 7 rangers. Brennan's physical form became increasingly translucent as his consciousness expanded across multiple timelines. He could be seen at Station 7 in 1968 when it was first constructed, in 1975 during the avalanche, in 2019 during the crisis resolution, and at countless moments in between, always watching, always ready to help. As the eternal guardian, Brennan exists in a state that challenges human understanding of identity and consciousness. He experiences every moment of his life continuously, from his birth through his death and beyond, while simultaneously existing at key moments in the park's history. He remembers his childhood, his ranger training, his failed marriage, and his cancer diagnosis, but he also remembers events that haven't happened yet and might never happen. The most remarkable aspect of his transformation is that Station 7 now exists whenever and wherever it's truly needed. Lost hikers caught in sudden storms at altitude might discover the station appearing in locations where it never historically stood. Brennan will provide them with hot coffee, accurate weather information, and safe directions back to established trails, always maintaining the cover story that he's simply a ranger working the night shift. Park records show evidence of Brennan's temporal activities throughout the decades. Logbook entries signed TB appear in official files dating back to 1968, describing unusual weather events, wildlife behavior, and safety recommendations with impossible accuracy. Future dated entries also exist, suggesting that his consciousness extends forward in time as well as backward, allowing him to prepare for events that haven't yet occurred. The psychological cost of existing across multiple timelines simultaneously has created a unique form of consciousness that remains recognizably human while transcending normal limitations. Brennan retains his personality, his dedication to ranger duties, and his compassion for lost hikers, but he also possesses knowledge of past and future events that could drive a normal mind to insanity. He has learned to compartmentalize his awareness, focusing on immediate needs while maintaining broader temporal perspective. Other park rangers have reported encounters with Brennan during emergency situations, describing him as appearing exactly as he did during his final days as a living ranger, but somehow more present, more substantial than an ordinary person. He provides assistance during rescue operations, offers detailed knowledge of terrain and weather patterns, and then vanishes once the immediate crisis passes, leaving behind only the lingering scent of coffee and wood smoke. The technological implications of Brennan's transformation have been studied covertly by government scientists who lack the clearance to understand the full context. His ability to exist in quantum superposition while maintaining individual consciousness represents a breakthrough in understanding the nature of identity itself. He proves that human awareness can survive and adapt to states of existence that were previously considered impossible. Perhaps most remarkably, Brennan's sacrifice created a stable temporal anchor that prevents similar dimensional breaches from occurring elsewhere in the park system. His consciousness serves as a permanent early warning system, detecting and containing anomalous events before they can threaten civilian populations. Park officials at the highest levels know that their ability to maintain safety in high-risk areas depends on the vigilance of a ranger who exists outside normal reality. The Eternal Guardian continues his duties to this day and will continue them indefinitely. He has become part of the mountain itself, as permanent and enduring as the peaks he protects. Future generations of park rangers will benefit from his watchful presence, though most will never know the true extent of his sacrifice or the cosmic horrors he prevents from manifesting in our reality. For those who venture into the high country of Rocky Mountain National Park, remember that someone is always watching over you. If you find yourself lost in a storm, if you see a warm light where no building should exist, if you encounter a kind ranger who seems to know exactly what you need, thank him. He has given more than his life to ensure that others can safely experience the wilderness he loves. Ranger Thomas Brennan, Badge 3847, Alpine Station 7, on duty forever.